Welcome to our weekly program, The Inside Story of Chabad in America through the Mindel Archives. Since we are now in the month of Tammuz, as we mentioned last week, and by Chassidim we call this month the Chodesh HaGeula, even though it's called Chodesh HaAvelos, as we explained. This is also the birthday of the Yud Beis Tammuz of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So now we are between the birthday of the Frierdiker Rebbe and the bris that was on Yud Tes Tammuz. So I want to share with you and read, if I have time, original fascinating letters from the Frierdiker Rebbe mostly, also from the Rebbe, that they wrote to a person by the name of Mr. Julius Stillman, a special person. Mr. Stillman was the one who helped the Frierdiker Rebbe come to America. He sent the visa, the affidavit he signed, and he took responsibility to support the Frierdiker Rebbe. So here I have a collection, all this, of the letters, just original letters, that the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote to Mr. Stillman. Mr. Stillman answered, Dr. Mindel, the Rebbe, he was called then the Ramash, a fascinating, which I will share this with you. As was sein abgescheit, I was very close to Mr. Stillman. For years, I went to his office almost every day. He was in my house a few times, and he came to my simchas. As in this book, there are pictures here, but he was in my simchas. And I got to know him through Rabbi Nissan Mindel. Here is a picture of him. This is the younger years. Now, the Frierdiker Rebbe wanted him to be part of Merkaz L'Nyonei Chinuch. The Frierdiker Rebbe saw his potential, and by sharing these letters, you will see what the Frierdiker Rebbe writes to him. It's unbelievable what he saw in Mr. Julius Stillman. Sometimes the Frierdiker Rebbe writes to him Yehuda Stillman. Most of the time he writes Julius, his English name. He was a clairvoyant, meaning he knew Hasidus. I'll give you an example. I once walked into his office, and I was holding my hand in my pocket. So I walked in, he looks at me, he says, Shalom Ber, I know you have 6 cents in your pocket, take it out. I had 6 cents in my pocket. He knew. Well, he was a special person. Now, this Mr. Stillman, once, he was sitting in this house. My children, they learned in Besrivke, they learned on Church Avenue, the old building there. It wasn't the best neighborhood. And he was sitting, and they come from Besrivke. They were in the 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, elementary. And they were running. So Mr. Stillman asked them, why are you running? So they said, well, we have to go to the washroom. We have to go to the bathroom. Why? You didn't go to school? You didn't go to the washroom? So they told him, my children were young, they told him that it's an old building, it's in the basement, it's dark, and they're afraid to go there. So they're running to go to the washroom. He was shocked. He tells me, I want to see you tomorrow in my office. I come into his office, and we started to talk about, I told him that Besrivke has no money. They're still in the old building. This was before Lefferts Besivka was built. There was on Crown and there in Church Avenue. And they don't have no money. So it's a problem. So he says to me, okay, so what I'm going to do for you is like this. Because he did promise the Frierdiker Rebbe something, but that's another story. So what he said is, he says, I want that Rabbi Mindel, I want to open an account. The Rabbi Mindel should open an account for Besrivke. Rabbi Mindel was part of the committee of Besrivke, Bechlal. The Frierdiker Rebbe made him in the 40s. So, the Rebbe. So a special account for a building. I'm going to give money to the building, but I want the Rabbi Mindel should be the one to give out the money. Should go to just to build, you have to have a building. How can this be when the children come like that? And then he wrote to me, checks to Besrivke. One check was $140,000. I have it right here. One check was $68,000. One check was $5,500. One check was $175. One check was $100. Anyways, there was quite a few checks. I have some checks. I have the copies over here. And he says, as soon as Rabbi Mindel will arrange with the committee of Besrivke that there should be a special fund, a special for the building, I will give you the checks. And he gave me the checks afterwards. This was the beginning of Besrivke, of the building. Later on, of course, there wasn't enough money to build a building. But this was the beginning. And he promised the Frierdiker Rebbe. Frierdiker Rebbe asked him about being a supporter, but which we'll come to it maybe in the future. So this is Mr. Stillman. So here we have I want to give you a glimpse. I don't know if I have time now. A glimpse of the connection between Mr. Stillman and the Frierdiker Rebbe. Now there are letters here, probably over 100, from the Frierdiker Rebbe, originals. How the Frierdiker Rebbe spoke to him. He saw his neshama. There's a letter here in 1950, after the Stalkus of the Frierdiker Rebbe. Our Rebbe wrote to him with his Ksav Yad, I have it here, that we both have a will, a tzavoah of the Frierdiker Rebbe. We were both together in his room before his passing. And the Frierdiker Rebbe told us what our goal in life together is. That's what he writes over here. I'll share with you, but not today probably. He was the one who, the classes in Manhattan, which I will go into it another time. I mean, there's so much that there was a Mr. Cowan, Alexander Cowan, that had a class in Manhattan, and the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe were very much, they wanted to know every single week what doing in the class, a class of lawyers. They had a class on Bible Unauthorized, and we'll talk about it, who wrote it, the whole thing. And he sent Rabbi Mindel to those classes. It's a whole thing. I can't go into it today, which I will not go into today because there is no time. There's a lot of, it's unbelievable things that of this, and I think that I will share with you in the future. I wrote an introduction to the book, to the letters of the Frierdiker Rebbe and the Rebbe. So I want to read from inside about Mr. Stillman, his background, and how he got to Lubavitch. And then I'll share with you some letters. Most of the letters, no, not most, but many letters were written in Yiddish, Hebrew, so I'll have to translate it into English, we'll see. But this is an introduction, so you'll understand who Mr. Stillman was, what the Frierdiker Rebbe saw in him. So, part of Yehuda, his name was Yehuda. The Rebbe called him Julius all the time. 2 times the Frierdiker Rebbe wrote Yehuda on him. So, Yehuda's vision for the world perfection led him to be connected with the Frierdiker Rebbe. While the Rebbe was still in Europe in the late 30s, Julius was introduced to the Rebbe through the mutual friend Mr. A. Cowan, during which the Rebbe expressed a deep spiritual connection he felt for Yehuda. You'll see it in the letters. The Rebbe sensed that divine providence had privileged you with a gift to infuse a great eternal light into our people. This is all from the letters. The Frierdiker Rebbe saw in Yehuda a worthy partner in the work of Chabad in the United States of America, being established shortly after in the early 1940s. With the help of God, my worthy son-in-law, the Frierdiker Rebbe writes, the Ramash, Rabbi Menachem Mendel Schneerson, together with our dear friend, Mr. Cowan, and my best friends, Mr. Chadakov and Mr. Mindel. Julius was invited to join in these efforts, and indeed, he did participate during the early years in the establishment of Merkez Le'Inyan Chinuch, the nucleus of Chabad education and outreach. And during the years as well, with his loyal support of the Rebbe and generous contribution to the Rebbe's holy work. It was during these early years that a number of Chabad efforts were established and launched. This was the release time. He was involved. He gave money. We have over here in the book the girls' school, Beis Rivke, and it was also called Beis Ashkenazi, which many people don't know. Mesilas Shabbos and publication Works for All. And in all of these, the Frierdiker Rebbe saw Julius' role as vital as the donations that were made in the construction of the Mishkan in the desert. And these were the minutes that I have over here, is a fascinating minutes that the Frierdiker, maybe I'll have time to read that. The Frierdiker Rebbe wrote to Julius, maybe I can read that now, just about the minutes that he wants to see him. This is written March 3rd, 1944. Today, Mr. Stillman, is the last day of the 4th year since we met personally, the 9th of Adar, February 18, 1940, when our essential feelings were for the first time locked together into a spiritual bond and soulful comprehension beyond words. Already, when still in Europe, I received correspondence from our dear good friend Mr. Cowan about you, Mr. Stillman, and as if impelled by a hidden spiritual force, I felt that you are the person whom divine providence had privileged with a gift of an inestimable quality to infuse a great eternal light into our people. When I arrived in the USA on the 9th of Adar and met you, Mr. Stillman, for the first time, it became clear to me, to my heartfelt joy, that my intuitive feeling had correctly foretold me about you. It was supremely delighted to meet with you with profound spiritual confidence that our get-together will bring eternal light to our people. But an enormous undertaking such as this requires preparation in order that it be truly successful with God's help. During the past 4 years, I made strenuous efforts in the way of preparation. With the help of God, my worthy son-in-law, Rabbi Schneerson, together with our dear friend, Mr. Cowan, and my best friends, Mr. Chadakov and Mr. Mindel, have created the proper foundation for the great spiritual work which you, Mr. Stillman, have been chosen by divine providence to carry out with my participation in it much happiness. I invite you, dear Mr. Stillman, to join me on Thursday, the 28th of Adar, March 23rd, God's willing. We will meet with my son-in-law, Rabbi Schneerson, and our dear friends, Mr. Cowan, and our associate, Mr. Mindel. Rabbi Chadakov wasn't there then, to confer on the important enterprise with God's help. And then the Frierdiker Rebbe gave him a bracha. And we have the meetings that the Frierdiker Rebbe told Rabbi Mindel to write. We have his handwriting to write the meeting. They had 3 meetings. This is something special that I think I should share it with you.